Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ealing Road podcast, where on today's episode, we're going to be previewing a trip to Anfield on Sunday. It's that time of the year again when I speak to Neil Atkinson of the Anfield Wrap. Neil, how are you doing, mate? Pleasure for joining us. Thank you.
All very good indeed. Looking forward to Sunday. Can't wait, in fact. First game back at Anfield, first league game. We played Sevilla in the pre-season friendly, but first league game back, and really excited about watching this Liverpool team.
Good stuff. I hear you're writing a book.
I've written the book. I'm this afternoon going to have to go and start the audio book in earnest because I've got about 5 days to deliver it, and I don't know if I've got enough voice. I'm a bad reader, to be honest with you, Mike. I'm a good talker and a bad reader, so it'll be full of asides. So it's called Transformer: The Revolution of a City and a Club, about Jurgen Klopp. It'll be out on September the 26th. I would like everyone to buy it because I want it to go to number one. But it's not only just about Klopp. It's very much about things learned from doing the Anfield Wrap across 10 years or so in a wider football sense, in a wider new media sense. It's been a pleasure to do, to be honest with you. Canongate have been great. I think it's good. I was worried there was a period of time when I wasn't sure if it would be because it was written very quickly in the aftermath of Klopp confirming he was going to stand down as Liverpool manager. It was something I kicked around for a few years before, but we never sort of got to grips with. So in the end, I'm delighted with where it's ended up. And yeah, it'll be out on September the 26th.
Perfect. Where can people get that?
All the places you get your books from. So whatever your book-based position is, I buy a lot of books from Hive, so you can get it there. But wherever you get your books from, and also in bookshops, it's, as I say, Canongate are publishing it. I'm optimistic it might do quite well. It might not, but we'll roll with the punches. If you're going to try and win big, you're going to lose big from time to time, which is one of the themes of the book.
Good stuff, mate. Well, I'm sure it'll be a fantastic read. Let's crack on with the pod. Just before we get going, guys, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. First of all, Neil, how has the start of the new season gone? Life after Jurgen Klopp, early impressions of Arne Slot. I know that there's a lot of noise around the lack of transfer business in Liverpool, but talk to me.
I like him. I like the football from what we've seen so far. I went out to the US, so I was at the 3 pre-season games in the United States, and we obviously all saw the game against Ipswich. I was at the game against Sevilla. It's different. There's no getting away from that. It's still a back four. It's still predominantly 3 lads in attack being joined, but apart from that, it is markedly a bit of a different setup, and what the players are being asked to do is different. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that a change can be as good as a rest, and I think that Liverpool weren't stuck in the ways. That'd be the wrong way to frame it. Liverpool do very well for the first 2/3 of last season, and then just go off the boil a little bit in the final third. And I think there's a few contributory reasons for that, including the idea that the manager was gonna move on. I think that's a small one, but I think it is a present one. So I'm so far buoyed by what we've seen on the pitch. I do worry that they need to pick a couple of players up off the pitch. I think it's Klopp, when he first arrived, didn't think he wanted that bigger squad. And then the more he lived English football reality, the bigger the squad's got. Slot only used 17 players for more than 900 minutes last season in finals, and that includes 2 goalkeepers. 900 minutes is approximately 10 games. Out of 34, it's a 34-game season, not a 38. And I do wonder / have a mild concern that Slot may well feel as though he can keep the players fitter. That could be true. It might not be. I think Liverpool are also just unlucky last season with injuries, in that they were unlucky about 3 seasons ago. And then in the 21-22 season, if anything, they feel like they've got too many players and they can't quite get everyone on the pitch at different times. So it's worth saying that there's no ultimate answer to this, but I do think Liverpool could do with having... I think 3 more options, 1 in each area of the pitch. I'm not that definite on what you need, but I think Liverpool could do with having 3 more options. And if Joe Gomez goes, which is currently being rumoured, then I think they definitely need to replace him with a defender. Then I think they could do with another midfielder. I think they could do with another forward, one who's got massive amounts of pace in wide areas, because the key takeaway so far from what Slot does is I don't think it will work if he doesn't have pace in wide areas. So he needs to be belt and braces and make sure every single time he picks a football team, he's got a lad who's got a ton of pace who plays wide.
In the starting 11, it's not too dissimilar from the side that went toe-to-toe with City and Arsenal last season. In terms of, you said you need sort of 3 more players. What would you say, where would you say is the main position? Because I know there was a lot of noise around Zubimendi, and that was a big one for Liverpool, the kind of one that got away, or he changed his mind.
Yeah. Liverpool fans, Liverpool supporters love a holding midfielder. And Liverpool have tried to buy holding midfielders in the last couple of years. They come very close to Caicedo. They have a good long look this time out at Zubimendi. They have a look at Lavia from Southampton, and that doesn't happen. I'm not quite as nailed down on that as the majority of Liverpool supporters. Let me be clear: the majority of Liverpool supporters disagree with me. I'm widely of the view that most holding midfielders have a moment in their career where they become holding midfielders. Very few break through. So Rodri's a bit of an anomaly. You can go all the way back to Petit and Vieira. Petit and Vieira, when they signed for Arsenal, neither of them are perceived as being sort of deep line midfielders. The manager asks them to play there, and they play really, really well. Footballers move positions all the time, and you attributes are a big thing. Ronnie Whelan is one of the best deep line midfielders Liverpool have ever had, and he scores in a League Cup final in 1982 playing left wing, but he drops back into that position as he grows a little older and the manager repurposes him for it. So at the minute we're playing Ryan Gravenberch there, and I think that's no bad thing. He plays well against Ipswich. I wouldn't have a problem with playing Dominic Szoboszlai deeper as well. Curtis Jones, his whole career, he started off as a left winger and now he's a deep line midfielder for Liverpool. McAllister spends a lot of last season playing as the deepest midfielder. So I'm a bit more agnostic on it. I don't see it as an article of faith that Liverpool need that, but I think therefore if Liverpool don't buy a deep line midfielder, they need to buy another attacking midfielder and then drop someone in and give them that responsibility a little bit more. Like I think Liverpool need another midfielder is my whole point here. I don't think it's as simple as it has to be someone who does that. If there's someone who does that, they can't get them who they think's good enough, but they could get someone who plays higher, then I'd rather do that and go from there. As I say, I'm in a minority view and I'm quite comfortable with that, but Fernandinho, who's one of the best holding midfielders the Premier League has ever seen, scores against Liverpool in a League Cup final playing right wing, or at least right mid. Because when he first arrived in England, Fernandinho was not perceived as being a deep line midfielder. He gets pressed into service there, and with coaching and with his own football ability, becomes brilliant. Rodri's actually a bit more of an exception. Even right now, it's interesting at the end of last season when Arsenal were putting the foot down in the title race, they played Jorginho deeper and pushed Declan Rice on because they felt as though they get more joy out of Rice higher up the pitch, and went from there with that. So I'm quite agnostic on the matter. But if Liverpool did buy Zubimendi, I'd be thinking, great, that's that sorted. Zubimendi and Gravenberch compete for that position. McAllister and Jones compete to play next to him. You covered for injuries, and then Szoboszlai and Elliott play as the attacking midfielder. That'd be because that's the key difference, really. Even though at the weekend it was a little bit more, McAllister was a little bit higher. It was a bit more of a 1 and a 2. What we've seen in pre-season, it's been a lot of a 2 and a 1. So right. 2 have sat in front of the back 4 rather than 1, which is what it used to be under Klopp. As I say, it was a little different for Ipswich, so I'm not 100%. But it's 2 working as a bit of a pair and then an attacking midfielder going and joining. That's what he's been doing in pre-season. So that's been the setup. And I think Liverpool have got all the constituent parts for that. They could just do with having one more. And as I say, I think they could do with another great player with pace in wide areas, in part to future-proof, but also in part to contribute now. And I think they could probably do with another defender who plays left-sided. That doesn't necessarily need to mean a left back, but someone who could play left-sided centre back in lieu of Van Dijk, and someone who could play left back when Liverpool want to do it a little bit differently, the way City do with Ake and Gvardiol, the way Arsenal do with Calafiori, Timber, and Ben White. I think Liverpool could do with one of them. That's something Liverpool don't currently have in the squad, is that idea of a ball-playing centre-back who can also do bits at full-back, or a ball-playing full-back who can also do bits at centre-back. They're the 3 profiles of players I think Liverpool should be looking to buy.
That's why it surprised me that it looks like you're trying to shift Joe Gomez, because I thought he did a really good job at left-back last year for Liverpool. But
I think he did, but I think Gomez is in this situation. I think that the left-sided aspect is the key one. So I think Gomez he's right-footed. I think he's a really good footballer, and I think he's had in a number of different ways through his career, mostly through injuries, but other matters. I think he's had hard lines. But it does look like Gomez. I think Liverpool are necessarily trying to shift Gomez. I just think there's a reality where Gomez is now 26, 27, and he wants to start every week. And I think he wants to start every week at centre-back.
Yeah.
And at the minute, he's behind Konate and Kwanzaa for the right-hand sided role. Whether he's suited to the left-hand sided role is a conversation, but even if he is, he's behind Van Dijk. He's now arguably Liverpool's third choice right back behind Conor Bradley and Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'd rather he started games for Liverpool at right back than Kostas Tsimikas, but the manager didn't look at him once in pre-season and did use Tsimikas in that area. So you're in a situation where I think if you are Joe Gomez, you're thinking to yourself, well, I think I should be playing 30, 35 starts a season. And it's difficult to imagine where they're coming from here. But he did have a really good season last season, and I think he's a really good player.
For sure. I think you mentioned Ipswich there, and I do want to talk about Ipswich. But just before we talk about the football specifically, what are Liverpool fans expecting this season? I know it's difficult to take much from that first game against Ipswich, just because by virtue of the fact they're a newly promoted side. But what are you guys expecting this season from Slot? What success?
I think it's a teeny bit complicated, but I think Slot himself has not looked for a single hiding place since he's turned up, and for me, that's the most buoyant aspect. It will be easy for him to come in and say, Jurgen Klopp, it's a really difficult manager to follow. It'll take a bit of transition. I need to get my own players in, get my own ideas over. Rome won't be built in a day. And he's coming in, his attitude is we need to win now. Last season is something to build on. Last season, Liverpool get the other side of 80 points and have 2 good cup runs and win a trophy. And he said last season is to be built on, not the idea that last season might be a high watermark for a year or two. And I think that's the most important thing for me. But for me, if you're asking what my expectation is, I think they should do better than last season. I think Liverpool are only about par last season for the quality of the player that they've got and the investment they put in the squad in terms of wages. I think Liverpool should break 80 points. And so my expectation is at the very least par. I expect a good European run. I expect the idea that the side is competitive at the top of the league. I don't think you can expect to win the league. I don't even think City can expect that, even though they've now won 4 on the bounce. I think expecting to win the league is exceptionally difficult. I think you can have a reasonable expectation if you're City that you are going to be challenging for the league title in May and expect that you are favourites for much of the season. But I think you can expect to be there or thereabouts. And the manager said, last season, this was a squad that was still banging it in April. Our job is to be banging it in May. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I've been surprised. Well, in fact, I'm no longer surprised. I've been actually a little bit disappointed with the amount of mainstream sort of chatter that has looked to act as though it's just going to be between Manchester City and Arsenal, and Liverpool will be a best and distant third and may well find themselves struggling to finish top 4. In that, I just quite like these people to learn the lesson at some point. Year in, year out, we've suffered this nonsense. I understand that people are able to look at what's happened with other managers when they've taken over and be able to be a little bit like, well, Klopp will be a tough act to follow because of Ferguson, because of Wenger. But there are other stories in football than Ferguson and Wenger, and those stories go way back as well. I'm quite buoyed. I'm not just buoyed by the second half against Ipswich. I'm quite buoyed in general. I think this fella's coming in. I think he's serious. I think his job is to coach. His job is not to manage. I think he knows he's in the results business. I don't think he's got the mentality of the dead patient here. I've got 5 years. I think he feels as though he needs to win now. And so I'll have my expectation matched by his, please. And I expect to see us there or thereabouts.
In terms of that second half performance against Ipswich, obviously it was very different to the first. I think the willingness of Slot to kind of change things at half time, which is not something a lot of managers would do, was kind of a benchmark of maybe the kind of ruthlessness or the willingness to be ruthless that he might have for the remainder of the season. But Trent doing Trent things. I know you guys spoke about him on your podcast. The pass for Salah was just incredible. And then obviously the front 3 firing as they normally do for Liverpool season in, season out. But what about the second half impressed you most, and what should Brentford be worried about the most in terms of that second half? Because you mentioned the differences between Klopp and Slot and the differences in the way they play. So without going on to the Brentford game, because we're going to do that in a minute, but whenever we've played Liverpool, it's always made for a pretty entertaining game. What kind of things should we expect from Slot's Liverpool that we didn't expect from Klopp's?
There's a bit more debate in the press. I think Liverpool, it's important not to act as though Klopp never did anything other than play one way, and that's nonsense. Klopp didn't even just only play one formation. Klopp played a variety of formations. Last season, Liverpool were a bit one note, but I think that Klopp very much had adopted the attitude last season if we go back to basics because of what had happened the season before, and we go from there. And I think Liverpool, towards the end of last season, become a little bit too one note. I think you look at Klopp in eras before. Liverpool, for instance, in much of the season where they get 97 points, win the European Cup in the first half of that season, Liverpool had played 4-2-3-1 a lot. Mane off the right, Keita off the left, Salah through the middle, and Firmino in behind. But we still talked about it as though it was the front three because there was the three of them on the pitch at once. But Liverpool did confound expectations and did have more than one way to play. That said, I think that the plan at least is that there's more patience. I think the plan at least is that you're not top intensity for 95 minutes, but you pick your moments to be unbelievably intense. I think there's a little bit more of what I'm almost trying to describe as a bit of a pulley system in terms of movement, sucking players in, exploding into the space that's left, accurate through balls, smart movement. Liverpool create 3 or 4 really good chances second half against Ipswich with through balls. Liverpool create 3 or 4 chances against Ipswich that are less than 8-10 yards out, players with the ball at the feet, or one header for Diogo Jota, which, these are quality chances. I think Liverpool will have what you could describe as a little bit more subtlety about them and be looking to pull sides apart and then create quality opportunities, home and away, in the vast majority of games. And then as part of that, then when they get ahead in games, look to demonstrate a bit more patience, a little bit less of a 1-2-3 sucker blow in there as well. But use the idea that when sides have got to chase the game against Liverpool, they'll obviously be willing to take more risks and leave more gaps. So I think there are going to be marked differences in that approach. I think it's important to say, though, as I say, that firstly and foremost, there's only so many different ways you can play football, and Liverpool do some things second half against Ipswich that are more reminiscent to Klopp. Robertson goes high, plays as an attacking left back, and that makes a massive difference in there as well. You're not that far away from the three playing as quite a pure three in attack, which again is, people would say, is a Klopp Liverpool reference point. Jota is more likely to run in behind second half than he was first half, when he was looking to come feet, come chest, and pick the ball up a little bit more. So I think all of that makes the point that I think Slot will do what he needs to do to win. But to your point about that substitution, I think when you want to talk about ruthlessness, I wouldn't even necessarily describe it at this point as whether or not it's genuinely ruthless. What I think it is, though, is that at the minute Slot owes none of these players anything.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know any of them. Other than what the work he's done with them so far, I think he's able to make a type of call that just becomes or became a little bit harder if you're Jurgen Klopp and you've got however many years of working with a certain footballer. Slot's at knowing any of these guys is 3 months. So I think that there is a different, he's able to have a slightly different look out there and a different approach. And I think that that's no bad thing either.
On to the Brentford game itself, more often than not, as I said in that question, it's always a pretty entertaining game between Brentford and Liverpool. Last season, Liverpool won by an aggregate score of 7-2. I remember speaking to you about the 3-0 game at Anfield, about how I would have said that scoreline was maybe it suggested that the game wasn't as close as it actually was, because I think Brentford played pretty well in the game against Liverpool at Anfield. The game against Liverpool at the G-Tech was a completely different story. We were terrible. It will largely be 2 very similar 11s due to the lack of signings on both sides. So, what are you expecting? A similar game to last year? So, what are your opening kind of thoughts on Sunday's contest?
I think Brentford are in a little bit of a mini place of renewal, and I think it's also a big season, and he's had the opportunity to have a good summer of rest for Mbeumo, and I'm expecting a better Brentford. I think the Brentford that plays at Anfield last season's in good nick. I think by the time you get into the sort of the muck and bullets of the season, I think there's just a little bit of Brentford almost being a bit sick of themselves a little bit. I think that happens to a team. I think you're almost a bit like, well, what's the point? We've been doing this Premier League now for X amount of time, and going upwards looks really hard, and the season's got away from us a little bit. We just need to get the other side of relegation and we'll be fine. And then we go from there. And I think Brentford will have summoned well. I think the manager's a clever man. I think he's a good man. And I think both of those things carry weight in this day and age. I think he's a man who loves his footballers, loves footballers in general. I think he comes over really, really well when he speaks about the game. And I think this is a bit of a difficult time to play Brentford. I think there's other sides who are around the same point in the table. I'd probably rather have had, who I expect to finish in the same. Like I'd love Wolves at home. Arsenal got Wolves last weekend. I'd love Wolves right now. I think that would be a good team to have. I think Brentford, there is the idea that we're just trying to make it a little bit fresher. To your point on signings, it looks like Brentford may well buy Sepp van den Berg from us.
That's my next question. Yeah,
But Carvalho from us. There's bits and pieces happening there that is a bit of a refresh, which makes a ton of sense. Pinnock isn't getting any younger. Ben Mee is most definitely not getting any younger as well. I think there's the feeling of the returning players from the injuries of last season. I've already mentioned Mbeumo. Rico Henry's not that far away. Hopefully Hickey's not that far behind because he looks like a good prospect, a good player as well. But I'm not expecting Brentford to be massively different. I think I would be surprised if Brentford rock up and play a back four and not a back three.
Yeah.
Maybe if the manager wants to be full of surprises this season, that might be something he does. I would, if I was to offer a criticism of the Brentford manager last season, is a gobshite who hosts the Anfield Wrap shouldn't be able to pick his starting 11. So if he chose to rock up to Anfield here and play a back four, I don't think that'd be a bad thing. Not least, it's a bit of a free hit for Brentford. There's an expectation that they won't win the game. It's not the same as having a home game. So maybe throw a bit of doubt in everyone's mind across the course of the season. I think that would be worse things for Brentford to do than to do that coming into this one. And then see if they do nick a goal, then shut it down half time or 60 minutes or something. So yeah, I'm expecting Brentford to be better, is sort of what I'm saying. But to your point, Brentford do play well at Anfield last season. So I'm expecting to be the first half of last season's Brentford. Before, as I say, the sort of the tarnish came on a little bit, which is what I think just sort of happened in the second half of last season. I think having clarity around the Toney situation, which it looks like you're going to have, I think is really, really useful. And I think it's just a shame the lad got the injury. I genuinely do. I think it's hard when you're trying to run a club in the Premier League with Brentford's budget to get a genuine sense of renewal. And I think he would have offered that. But I think the club's so smart to have not played Toney against Palace. The gamble pays off because you win the game. So that makes it pays off doubly. I think it was the right thing to do anyway, but it pays off doubly. I don't expect Toney to be any part of this one. I think that Brentford need to get away from that, become the next phase of Brentford. And I think that started. I think it'll continue. And if I was looking for Brentford, if I supported Brentford, the thing I'd be looking for is, can we be top 10 curious by January? Because I think a Brentford that's on the front foot and looking upwards is a dangerous one. And then the other thing I'd be looking at is results against teams at home. Last season, Brentford only beat one team at home that finished above them, and you just finished 15th. So that's not a good place. It means you're not winning many home games. I think that first game was massive for Brentford. I thought it meant more for Brentford than it did for Crystal Palace. I think it's so important that you won it. And so I'm expecting a slightly confident Brentford and one that's now in a position where it can take a couple of chances. And the thing I would look for is, will it play a back four at Anfield?
You mentioned, just because I want to talk about Bryan Mbeumo in a little bit more detail with regards to Mo Salah, because I know that at one point it looked as though maybe the Saudi links were going to come to fruition, and Liverpool, there were definitely some rumours that Liverpool were looking at Bryan Mbeumo as a potential replacement. It's not ended up like that. But just before we get to that and the new look Brentford that I want to talk to you about, what can you tell us about Fabio Carvalho and potentially Sepp van den Berg? Because it sounds like Van den Berg is on his way. This could be the start of a very fruitful relationship between Liverpool and Brentford, which I think, I can't remember whose report I was reading, maybe David Ornstein's, when he was saying the club have a good relationship because of the sale of Carvalho. And it looks like you guys are getting some good money for him as well, for someone who hasn't really broken to the first team at all.
Yeah, for both of them, but I think they're both really good players. It's interesting, look at who you're competing for with Van den Berg. It's Leverkusen. Leverkusen might win the Champions League. I don't think they will, but they might. And I think that speaks volumes about what Van den Berg did in Germany last season. He looked great in pre-season. Really, really impressive in the pre-season games he featured in. And I was over on the tour with the US, so I saw him in person. Also speaks really well. Seems like a really switched on cat. I liked him a great deal, really, and just sort of seeing him in the mix zone and the way in which he interacted and the sheer openness and honesty he had about his own situation, I thought he was a credit to himself. He's also a credit to the process that he's been on. He's not played games for Liverpool, but he's played a lot of games of football across the last 3 or 4 years, Sepp van den Berg, and he's gone on a journey, and I think he's developed. There was a period when we first signed him and you looked at him and you were like, oh God, how's this ever going to happen? And now when I saw him in the summer, if something happens and Liverpool chose to keep him and use him, I wouldn't think that's mad. I just think, though, it's difficult with defenders because defenders need to play. And the one thing I would say is that if Van den Berg is going to Brentford over Leverkusen, I think he's going because he expects to start.
Mm-hmm.
So precisely what that means, who he starts alongside, that's almost your question, your conversation, because you paid a lot of money for Nathan Collins a couple of seasons ago. I think Mee is now a backup option. I think that's in there. Aya's not quite. I like Aya, by the way. Whenever I've caught Brentford, I think Aya's a good player, but he's not quite managed to pin himself down at centre back. He's been a bit unfortunate. He's been the player who's been moved around from the outside looking in due to injuries and had to fill in other areas. But I like him. But I think Van den Berg will probably expect to get ahead of him in the pecking order from day one if he's going to go to Brentford. So I think you're buying a starting centre back is my point, and I think you're buying a starting centre back who I think is good enough to play European football at some point. To play for a side that's finishing in the Europa League positions. So I'm very pro Sepp van den Berg. I'm quite pro Fabio Carvalho. I think the Carvalho problem for us, and the one I would ever so slightly worry he might have for Brentford, is just the physical aspects of the game. I think he is a tremendous finisher. I think he keeps his cool around opposition areas. I think he's great with the ball at his feet. I think he's a really good technical player. I think his temperament in those positions is brilliant. So it's a matter for Brentford of getting him in those positions, because I think if you get the ball to Carvalho with space in and around the opposition penalty area, I think he score goals. I really do. I'm not just being kind there. The difficulty for him is at the highest level is getting himself into those areas and getting into those areas with space. He's not the quickest, he's not the strongest. And precisely where he plays and where he will play for Brentford, I think is a really interesting question as the season wears on. I think it's a really shrewd signing. I could well imagine a world where he could quite comfortably play behind Wissa and Mbeumo in a bit of a 4-3-1-2. I could imagine that could work quite well if Wissa and Mbeumo do work between fullback and centre back, which I think suits Mbeumo especially down to the ground. I like Wissa a lot as a player as well. I could see how he could feature off the left in a 3-4-3 or 3, that sort of shape 5-2-3, if that was something that Brentford wanted to play. The difficulty is just my overriding Carvalho concern may well just prove to be very good footballer, just literally what is the position for him in 2024. And I think that's part of the reason why Liverpool have moved him on. But the talent, and as I say, especially the goal scoring poise, I think it verges on inarguable.
I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see where he fits into the team, because in the game against Palace, our front three with Kevin Schade back, who was out injured for most of last season, it was the kind of a fluid front three of Wissa, Kevin Schade and Bryan Mbeumo, and it was just frightening. Every time those three, especially in transitions, as soon as Wissa would drop deep and turn and swivel, we'd get ourselves in a 3v3 really quickly, which is why, although I don't think we'll win on Sunday, I do think there will be opportunities. And there normally has been opportunities when we've come to Anfield. I can remember Bryan Mbeumo having some pretty good opportunities. I think he scored one of them that might have been ruled out in the maybe the first season or the second season we came to Anfield. But it will be interesting to see where Carvalho fits into the side, especially now that front three has put down such a marker in that first game, because every Brentford fan was really excited to see how that front three would work with the pace in there is just going to, and the way they interchange, it's just frightening. So we didn't see much of him against Palace, but we're definitely excited to see how he fits in anyway. Overall feelings on the game before I get your score prediction. I think we've already kind of touched on it, but I did want to talk to you a little bit about Bryan Mbeumo and maybe just the lingering Salah talk, just because what kind of happened there? Because it looked for everyone, I think, as though once Klopp left, the Saudi links were already there from the previous season. Salah would be on his way, and then there was an obvious link. At least from a Brentford perspective, I think a lot of fans were saying, Bryan, if we can get money for him, he would be a ready-made fit to be that Salah replacement. In terms of how Liverpool recruit as well with the data, if you look at Bryan's underlying numbers, he is a goal and assist machine, literally a goal and assist machine. But yeah, talk to me about Salah and Mbeumo.
Salah loves playing for Liverpool. It's the under-discussed thing, actually. I would also at times include Liverpool supporters in that, but I think sort of culturally, Mo Salah's had the time of his life playing for Liverpool. It's been life-defining for him. And I think he's took to it in a way which I think, because of the way in which he's perceived, not least because he doesn't do that much media, and also the media he does do is quite controlled. I think he's sort of perceived as being, I want to use this word, and I don't mean it with any of the negative connotations that come with it, but I think there's been a perception of him as being a little bit, in inverted commas, aloof. And I just don't think that's ever been the case. I think he's loved it from the minute he's got here. I think he's loved playing for the supporters he plays in front of. I think he feels a genuine emotional connection. And I think that's in part because, whilst now the journey of Mo Salah looks as though it was always going to be one of sheer glory because of the level of his talent, the truth of it is it didn't work for him at Chelsea. He had to take a backward step for a couple of years. And then it's Liverpool that's been part of what's propelled him into being a global superstar, which is what he is. I think there's still a chance that Salah stays, signs another contract extension. And when I say a chance, I actually am beginning to come to the view it might well be the likeliest outcome, is that he becomes a player who Liverpool enter into a year-on-year relationship with. And within that, there may be an occasional pay decrease or something like that. But I think Salah wants to break records with Liverpool. I think he wants to leave with his greatness not being able to be disputed. So I think as long as he feels as though he can perform at the very highest level, I've always thought the Saudi thing's overstated for Salah, because I think he if Paris Saint-Germain were interested in Salah, then I'd think that's a live runner and rider. But right now, I think he thinks he can score the winner in a Champions League final. And that's what he wants. He wants that more than he wants money. He's not short of money. He earns a lot of money out of Liverpool. I'm sure there's a point at which money for every player is, money that can be an offer from places like Saudi Arabia could be so mad that, yes, you have to sort of take it deadly seriously. But Mo Salah's about greatness. He's about being iconic. And his best way to do that's Liverpool. And then if you add on top of that the fact that I think he's loved his time at Liverpool, that he seems settled as a family, they seem settled as a family. I think all of that is, to me, it's suggestive that, as I say, in the bar chart of what I think will happen, it's not the biggest bar in the world, but I think that to me, it feels at the minute as though it may well be likelier that he does one more year at Liverpool anyway than anything else. Simultaneously, though, I think that would have to come with the idea that he's going to, he needs to have his minutes managed a little bit more if we're going to get the very best out of him, and his role managed a little bit more. So, Arne Mbeumo, I love him. He's, I think he's going to be the sound of the summer. I feel as though this is going to be a huge season for him. I think he's ready, and I think he's had the opportunity to recharge in a couple of different ways. Sometimes an injury is not a bad thing in the longer run, in that it gets a player out of the week in, week out toll of playing and allows them to sort of recuperate a little bit, especially at a certain age. You don't want to have another one now. That's not what my argument is. But last season, it being a little bit injury hit might mean that he can contribute 38 games, 16 goals and 14 assists this season and really wow people. I expect him to wow people this season, and I think he should be high on the list for any Salah successor, or as part of any smart Salah succession plan. If Liverpool do one more year out of Salah, but the lived reality is Liverpool need to have 6 quality forwards, then I would love Mbeumo to be on that list for Liverpool to add one, if they want to share that load a little bit more. I think he's great, I really do, and I think he's going to have a really, really good season, and I think he's going to be a breakout star.
Good stuff. Good to hear, Neil. Just before we finish up, score prediction.
Liverpool 3, Brentford 0, but that will not be as comfortable as it sounds.
Similar to last year, then.
Yeah, I think Liverpool might get an early goal, and then I think Brentford will be smart and make it a bit of a horrible afternoon. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's one of those games that's 1-0 on 70, 75, finishes 3-0 to Liverpool, and everyone acts like it was always going to go that way. Whereas on 55 minutes, everyone's nervy. So my score predictions it's a conditional score prediction, in that I think my whilst it sounds as though I am not predicting the comfortable win for Liverpool, I am predicting an eventual comfortable scoreline.
Well, let's hope for a good game regardless. I'm looking forward to it. I've not been to Anfield since they redid. So they've redone the stand above. So is the away end changed at all? Or
yeah, no, you're in the same part, but there's a tier above you, a much bigger tier above you.
But yeah, no, it should be a very good day. Normally, like I said earlier, it's normally a good game when Brentford and Liverpool meet. The Elam Road podcast will be back after the Liverpool game with a full-time show. Just before you leave, guys, remember to drop a comment down below. How are you feeling ahead of Liverpool? We've got an episode about Ivan Toney already out, so if you haven't already listened to that, go and do so. It looks like his transfer to Saudi Arabia is being wrapped up as we speak. How are you feeling about that situation? What would you like the formation to be when we go to Anfield on Sunday, let us know in the comments below. And also, just before we go, remember to follow us on the socials. It's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Good luck for Sunday.
Excellent. Good luck to you too, and enjoy the rest of the season.